Hi, welcome to How to Be Humiliated Without Losing Your Job. Dive deep into human leadership crafted for today's fast-paced business world. Listen to our podcast on all major streaming platforms and join us as we explore the essence of human leadership in today's dynamic business landscape. I'm Roberto Torres, a seasoned startup engineer leader, alongside Chris Ollerkin, a Fortune 100 IT leader. Today, we will discuss how the human leader fosters the team to an empowered environment. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Roberto. Good to see you again. I hope you and your family are doing well as we head into the winter season and things start to cool off a little.
Likewise, sir. Yes, indeed, everything is cool and going well over here.
Very good.
Yes, sir. Well, being in an empowered environment, it is something that most people seek and very few, I think, can manage to achieve this. Usually in a startup environment, we have to pivot often, and to achieve this, to accomplish this pivoting, uh, an empowerment environment, it helps us a lot to go all this path. Can you share with me maybe some thoughts about this in well-known companies such as Honeywell?
Certainly. I think that, empowerment and nimble teams, things like that, is very popular from all sizes of companies, super large to small startups, et cetera. But the key thing is really defining what do you mean by empowerment, and how do you communicate that to your team to make sure that they have boundaries around what you're empowering them with. My personal experience has been that where there's been failures, where an employee gets rewarded for their empowerment or gets disciplined or reprimanded for their empowerment, is because the humane leader didn't do as good of a job as to define what they meant by empowerment. I think if we talk about one of the easiest ways to define empowerment might be around financial things. Perhaps you're going to empower your team to make decisions as long as they stay under a certain dollar amount of impact. For instance, maybe one of your team members wants to try out some software, and the trial version costs $1,000 to get a 1-month license. All right, if you set the financial boundary that you say, look, yeah, you can test certain things as long as it doesn't commit us to maintenance that we have to pay for the next 5 years, as long as it's under a certain dollar amount, these are the boundaries of your empowerment. That enables employees to go research things, do things, make decisions, try things, and come back to you without you being involved in the details. But if you don't define that fence, what happens if they go out and they agree to pay for and they sign some documents, even though they're legally not supposed to be able to commit the company to funds, and they commit to $10,000 a year of maintenance for the next 5 years? You didn't approve them to do that. Now they're going to get disciplined for their empowerment. So I think it's really important that as you enable your team to be nimble and empower them, did you define it in ways that they can feel empowered and know where those boundaries, where those fences are of that risk-taking? Because if you haven't defined it and they overstep their bounds and now you're not happy with what they did, that's the humane leader's fault, not the employees.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's why when we began talking with the team, we had to set up those boundaries, and we have to mention what is beyond those ones and behind those ones as well. Usually, when I spoke with any team that I have that I've been managing, what I do is it's easy. Okay, we're going to have this empowered environment. I usually tell a story regarding what happened in the 70s when you went to an airport and to take a flight, and by something you lose it. Back then, at the 70s, when you lost the flight, you had to repay that flight. And when you arrive back home again after this trip ended, you had to write down a letter to the airline company, and they would took, excuse me, like 3 or 4 months to repay you. Right now, if you lost a flight, whatever are the causes, you go to the counter and say, I'm sorry, I lost the flight. And the lady or the person behind the counter will say to you, don't worry, I will take you to the next flight, which is maybe in another airline company, or it will take you to another flight a later hour. And that is because they have the empowerment themselves, and they will work with you, so it won't be a burden and a problem to you, and they will make their life easier, because otherwise they will have to the company verify and yada yada yada. You know, that happens the same at startups today. And when I work at any company, any startup, I do this. And what I usually tell to the team, besides this airport scenario, etc., is it's easy, man. It's easy. What you have to do is, if it impacts the business, and I mean by scope, by money, by time, maybe by quality, before you do a change, talk to me. Bring me your arguments. I will tell you mine after I listen to you, and we'll make a decision together. If it's a yes or a no, or you have to maybe scratch a letter and do something else. Oh, but if it isn't, maybe we had to implement something that won't bring a cost to a project. Go ahead and tell me later what you did. And if it's something awesome or something that brings a value to the team, let's talk it out about that in our group meeting. So basically, I think with specific guidelines and boundaries, set up boundaries, anyone could do this environment.
Yeah, and I think as you start, if you're new to leadership, stick with controls that are maybe easier and very objective. So if we use kind of that money scenario that I used at the beginning, a rookie humane leader or an early leader, team leader, those financial types of measures are very black and white. It's a dollar amount. You set boundaries around that. It's very objective. You don't have to offer much opinion around it. As your team is both maturing, so you have employees in your team that have 10, 15, 20 years of experience, and you're now a humane leader for the last 10 years or more. Now some of those boundaries that you're talking about, like taking risk, implementing a change, they're much more subjective. And I think that's where the humane leader struggles, regardless of their experience level, is they're going to struggle to quantify what is the acceptable level of risk. I used to get a lot of feedback. I'm a very conservative person. I used to get a lot of feedback, we're trying to empower you. I was a leader, I was a director, but we're trying to empower you to take more risk. And I heard this from many different vice presidents that I reported to. Okay, this is a reoccurring theme, but they all struggled to quantify that in a way that set up those boundaries. And the odd thing with Honeywell was, as a junior manager, I had signing authority for over $100,000. When I became a senior manager, I had signing authority up to $1 million. When Honeywell bought us and I became a director, I could not order my own pens. So as I moved through my career and went higher in Honeywell, my actual authority to spend and take risks was zero, really. I mean, I couldn't commit financially anything. And most of our vice presidents couldn't even commit to anything financially. The CFO had to a regional or departmental CFO, vice president, chief financial officer, would have to sign off. Now, we had a lot of CFOs, so not just one. So there wasn't just one signing off for all of Honeywell. There were tons and tons and tons of them, but literally most vice presidents had $0 signing authority. So, empowerment is really around defining what that is for your team. And it may be monetary. It may be a company where, no, you can't do monetary things. Okay, well then let's define, what risks you can take in a way that we can do that. And so, for instance, if you're going to implement a new feature and the potential negative impact is to 100 people, that's quantifiable. If the risk and the change doesn't go well, it's going to impact 500,000 external customers. Okay, unacceptable level of risk, and so again, I'd urge the humane leader, regardless of their experiences, they're going through their experience level, is just ensure that you're quantifying to your team what that acceptable level of risk is and how are we going to measure it. Because the last thing you want to be doing as the humane leader is having a discussion in a performance review for an employee, or after the employee took the risk that didn't go well, that you now actually have to reprimand them for something you told them to take risks on. And that's not good humane leadership.
Yeah. One thing is regarding risk management is if you let people take risk without the backup of a document that has this risk management and the probably outcomes and the step that it has to be taken in order to avoid that risk, is going to be really difficult, and there's going to be probably a lot of failure within that project. So when you begin mentioning about risk itself is a powerful word that people might be afraid to take a risk, to jump to a risk situation. So what I usually do is I had to create this risk management document in which you mention what is the risk, what will be the outcomes, what is the percentage, who will be managed in the team, or who will be responsible to not let this risk go forward. And then with this, you to have all the perspective, or most of the perspective of what is going to happen. And as soon as a scenario arrives, a new scenario, a new risk, let's say for instance, you write it down and you begin giving this to the team. I think yes, it is a lot of work, but it is maybe creating a risk-free environment.
Yeah, I don't know that it's risk-free, but it is managed risk, right? Nothing is risk-free, but it is managed risk.
Yeah.
And it's an acceptable level of risk that you're telling the employee, the humane leader is telling their employee, look, we define the risks, we talked about them, it's an acceptable level of risk, and if one of those negative outcomes occurs, you're not going to get punished. See, this is the culture, the true culture of empowerment, is that you've defined that well, the employee can take the risk, and there is not punishment when something that, yeah, we forecasted, we tried to avoid it, but it did occur, the negative thing did occur, so I'm not going to punish you. We took the risk, it was a gamble, it didn't work. Don't punish the employee. And I think in cultures that talk about empowerment and they say we're empowering our employees, but when they take the risk and the bad negative thing happens and they punish them, the other employees see that happening and they realize we're not really empowered. They're telling us to take risks, but then they want to punish us when something bad happens. And certainly I can speak to that at length. And, it really shows when the company's culture is really behind empowerment and when they are not. And so if I think as the humane leader, the part you can control is that articulation, that discussion with the employees so that they fully understand what the boundaries are of acceptable risk. And you as the empowered humane leader, you need to not punish them when you've defined it well and they try something and it doesn't work out. You, the humane leader, might get punished because your leadership's not really empowering you. They're lying. But
Yeah.
you need to protect your employees because you empowered them. It's your word on the line. You defined to them, what the boundaries were. And if they stayed within that and it didn't turn out okay, that's supposed to be acceptable in an empowered environment.
Yeah. And empowerment, it is a trend word that has been for 10 years or maybe more. And the thing is, when someone who doesn't, which is not a humane leader, grabs that word and tries to implement it without the whole spectrum of what is needed to implement this, is going to be a failure. And I remember a boss, not a leader, which took that word, put it on to me and said, we're going to create an empowering environment. Oh man, great. And it's true. One day later, he told me, no, I'm not cool with this. I don't feel that is something good for me, not the department, not the company. We're going to remove it. So, okay. So we're not going to do it. So I think that rather taking trendy words, we had to be, really aware of the benefits that an empowerment environment is going to create, which are many for myself. I have been in too many startups in which an empowered environment, an empowerment manager, an empowerment team can create amazing stuff because you don't know anything. And if you provide with this safe environment in which you will tell, you can fail, but I won't fire you. You can test and begin learning. You could create new projects based on this, and maybe it will turn into new revenue stream for the company, or it will bring value to our customers. It's an amazing stuff, but it has to be guided by the humane leader, and it has to be recorded, to put on to certain numbers to see if it's something that it brings value or it isn't.
Yeah, it has to be really well defined. And I think humane leaders are just typically, as they develop their humane leadership style, they get better and better at defining those boundaries. And you really have to be able to define it objectively. Too many times I've seen people get held accountable for their empowered decisions. With the failure mode wasn't the actual decision. The failure mode wasn't what they were trying to do. The failure mode was that they didn't really define to what level of empowerment the team or the employees had. And that's where things start to go wrong. And I do believe that your advantage as a startup versus a big established company is that an empowered team in a huge established company, the risks, the acceptable level of risk is actually much lower, right? Because a mistake could maybe shut down access to a system to 100,000 employees or 1 million customers. So when they talk about empowerment in super large companies, the level of empowerment very likely is going to be much less than for your startup, because maybe you're very early in your startup and you don't even have paying customers yet. So now really all you're risking is some labor hours. boy, you can define that pretty clearly and give people a very broad array of risk that they can take. Versus, if you're in an established company and you cause an outage and it impacts revenue, and now you got to report it to Wall Street, which now the stock declines, your level of acceptable risk in that environment is much less than at the startup.
Yeah. Have you, let me ask you something. You mentioned that when you were working at UOP, you have a certain budget when you arrived to Honeywell, or when Honeywell bought a company, that budget disappeared. If you were maybe the CEO of a big, well-known company such as big as Honeywell, and you wanted to implement empowerment within the company, what you wouldn't do?
What would I not do?
Yeah.
Boy, I'll tell you, it is a struggle, because I do understand from the CFO's perspective, right? Because they're being held accountable for very tight, strict budgets. So when the leader isn't really empowered either, right? So the CFO is not empowered at all, because they've committed to Wall Street, we're going to hit this revenue number and we're going to hit this expense number and we're going to hit that no matter what. So when they make statements like that, the CFO isn't even empowered. He's only empowered, or she is only empowered, to either cut budgets or fund budgets to keep them within these fences that they committed to Wall Street. So I think, if I was trying to avoid the mistakes of a large company, I would try and figure out the amount of budget I could actually, because this is a first place to start, as I mentioned, as a humane leader, is how much budget could I allocate to teams that, if they failed or succeeded, doesn't impact my commitment to Wall Street. And that's where I think they struggled to empower employees, is that their decision was nothing's acceptable. You cannot miss. And so therefore, I guess my first step, or what I would try to avoid, is very strict financial controls. There has to be some level of flexibility to try new products and try new ways of doing things, or try new services, because ultimately that will drive greater revenue and greater sales in the company in the long run. And I think, if you look kind of at their stock performance currently, it has some of these tighter controls have shown that they're not really their stock has been pretty flat or down, unfortunately.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Let me answer the same question that I did to you about myself regarding a startup. What I wouldn't do, it would be to not to listen to your team when a new idea or solution is brought to the table. And that is usually what I have found. It is a problem with founders, either one or all of them, because they are too stick to the problem that we're trying to solve, and by creating a solution that they don't see more about what is going on, because they think that their only solution that they have thought is the proper one, the correct one. And usually when you try to implement empowerment within the team, is you, rather than taking their hand and going along the path to what is going on, you say, okay, you're free to walk. You can either jump, run, or whatever. And the problems with the founders is they have a line and they say, no, we're going to do this. So great ideas go to the dump. Great ideas go stick to the mud because they don't go forward because people won't listen. They will hear you, but they won't listen to what is really important. So that is what is happening usually at startups, and that they should do with the founders.
Yeah, they may have the great strategic idea, but the implementation of that tactically takes empowered employees to try different things and experiment, right, and take those risks. And unfortunately, I've been exposed to startups only in our discussions to acquire them, as I participated in some acquisition teams. And what I saw is you'd see really great creative founders with great creative ideas, and the successful ones had really brilliant employees who tactically were empowered to try different things to bring the concept to the marketplace. And I think truly startups have an advantage over large companies for that kind of empowerment philosophy, because your fence is not as restrictive. In my old job, the financial boundaries were hard and fast and would get you fired if you violated them. In a startup, you can be a little bit looser with those controls. The fence won't be as tight. You can probably risk implementing different things and have them completely fail and not get fired. And so really defining that, empowerment, like we said, is the key. And I think if you truly want to work in an empowered environment, I would recommend smaller companies, to be honest. If you're searching for a job and you want to be a humane leader and you want to truly empower your teams, don't work at gigantic conglomerates. Work at companies that are smaller and truly are nimble, and ask probing questions when you're interviewing about, define empowerment for me. Define some of the boundaries of your empowerment in this role I'm interviewing for. That's what I would want to know. If I was looking for a new role, I'd want to know, what's your definition of empowerment? Tell me about it so that I understand what kind of boundaries I'm going to have.
Yeah, true. And one thing that I had to add, if you're going to aim for smaller companies, or in this case, startups, try to identify, or if really that startup is a 100% empowerment company. Because as I mentioned, when a founder says, no, we're not going to go this way because I don't see a fit, and you don't listen to your team, maybe it's going to crumble down.
Yeah, not truly empowered. It was just marketing words to get you hired. They used the empowerment word as marketing to get you hired. The reality is, they're an autocracy, right? They're going to dictate how you're going to do everything. So, and that's an okay philosophy. Founders get to set the philosophy of their company.
Ah.
It's just unfortunate they're using words that many of us would put a different definition to empowerment than that.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I think with this, we could end this episode.
Very good. It was a good discussion, and I hope the humane leaders do their best to empower the employees, because I do believe it's the right model if you define it well.
Well, it could touch the team, to ignite that team to become better and have better results.
Absolutely. All right.